So I'm going to read just a quick story from my collection, Battle Without Honor or Humanity, the second volume, which is going to be published, I think, maybe by Raw Dog Screaming Press. They haven't really seen any of it. This might be coming out in 2015, and this is the second volume, so presumably the first volume will come out at the beginning of the year in 2015, and then this second volume will be the latter volume, the second volume. If they like it, they haven't heard this story, so maybe this will turn them off. Nothing will happen, and I will be in my basement sucking on the carpet. So the name of this piece is called Hawgstrüffel by me, D. Harlan Wilson.
Yeah, we'll publish it.
Yeah, I know, right? Hawgstrüffel. He stood on the roof and blinked at the stars. His name was Hawgstrüffel. He didn't look anything like his name, and yet every gesture, every glance, every spoken word was an attempt to assert an identity that the name promised and reliably failed to deliver. Somebody killed Hawgstrüffel. They dragged his body off of the roof and flung it into a ditch near the interstate. It went unnoticed for months. A motorist control of his vehicle and crashed into a sign pole. The sun got in his eyes. He was hiking back to the motel on I-96 to call a tow truck when he encountered the corpse of Hawgstrüffel. It rested among the cattails and the stalks like an empty rucksack. Alarmed, Grandier picked up his pace, but by the time he reached the motel, he had forgotten about Hawgstrüffel as well as his car. He got a room and took a shower, admiring the grout that held the shower tiles together. He turned on the TV and climbed into bed, disavowing the unpleasant sensation of stiff, starched sheets. Somebody killed Grandier. It might have been the motel's groundskeeper, Wendell Mowat, who had been hiding in the closet, fingers clutching the blinds of a sliding door panel. There was no gunshot. Wendell Mowat succumbed to a crippling depression. Unable to cope with the prospect of committing murder, he rushed to see Niall, his therapist. There's a terrific pause here. Yeah. Terrific pause. What are you thinking? Asked Niall after a terrific pause. I'm thinking about your neck, responded Wendell Mowat. You have a thin neck. It makes your head look like a balloon or something. He studied his head. But your head isn't as big as all that, not in and of itself. He studied his neck. You have a thin neck, he repeated, and made a snapping gesture. Striking preemptively, Niall leapt onto the chaise and strangled Wendell Mowat with his tie. This occurred just as his secretary, Hildebert, entered the room to ask if anybody wanted coffee, so Niall had to strangle him too. Following a series of deceptions and evasions, Thorstensen, Jurgen, and Diedrich took Niall into custody. The detectives bound him by the wrists and ankles with nickel-plated cuffs, stuffed him into an unmarked vehicle, and drove him to prison. They ran several red lights and rolled every stop sign, sirens blaring like broken pelicans. There was an interrogation. Nobody tortured Niall, nobody even raised their voice to him, but he spilled his guts anyway. Somebody killed Niall. They left him in his cell, artfully draped across the lower bunk. There was no cellmate. Thorsten, Jurgen, and Diedrich sort of looked at each other and wondered what to do. Niall is dead, Jurgen remarked. Thorstensen and Diedrich nodded in consternation. By the time Gelderloo showed up, Thorstensen, Jurgen, and Diedrich had fled the crime scene. He assumed the arresting officers were dead. Everybody dies, Gelderloo reminded the deputy sheriff, Bjorn, ribbing him. He laughed perfunctorily and poured himself an aperitif. Police chiefs like Gelderloo didn't have to answer to anybody except mayors, and Ingegard was on vacation. Something happened to Gelderloo and Bjorn. Everybody figured they got killed. As Van der Zweed, the forensics expert in residence, inspected the bodies, he wondered if the aperitif had been spiked with something. The glass had exploded when Gelderloo allegedly dropped it and left behind a telltale stain on the floor, but that didn't account for Bjorn. Additionally, there were no traces of anything poisonous in Gelderloo's system, by Van der Zweed's reckoning, And in fact, Gelderloo's heart was still beating. So was Bjorn's. As if sensing van der Zweed's attention, both hearts stopped. Nothing happened to van der Zweed. Everything turned out all right for him. Ott, on the other hand, preferred to be called Utni, since Ott, in his view, failed to adequately reflect his selfhood of incidents, whereas Utni did just that. Ott had no connection to van der Zweed, Bjorn, Gelderloo, Diedrich, Jürgen, Thorstensen, or anybody else. He was just a man with a name. Nothing happened to Ott either, not for a while anyway. But something was going on. Ott met van der Zweed at a cafe to talk about being alive. They had never met before. "It's Utni," blurted Ott as they shook hands. "Utni?" said van der Zweed. "Yes, Utni," said Ott. "Utni. Utni." They sat down near the dessert carousel, and a waiter brought them a menu. There was only one item on it, espresso. "2 espressos, please," said van der Zweed, "then dessert." The waiter told them there was only 1 espresso, as the menu indicated. "1 espresso, please," exclaimed Ott, then leaned over the table and whispered to van der Zweed, "We'll share it." Van der Zweed ran a fingernail across the glass of the dessert carousel. The waiter never came back. At home, Ott took his time making the guacamole. He peeled a fresh avocado, put it in a bowl, and mashed it up with a shellback spoon. He added chopped red onion, diced cherry tomatoes, lime juice, and a crushed clove of garlic. I recommend that for anybody who's interested in making good guacamole. He arranged a fan of water crackers around the finished product. He peeled a fresh avocado, put it in a bowl, and mashed it up with a shellback spoon. He added chopped red onion, diced cherry tomatoes, lime juice, and a crushed clove of garlic. I recommend that for anybody who's interested in making good guacamole. He arranged a fan of water crackers around the finished product. Before he started eating, he had to clean the garlic press. He hated cleaning the garlic press. Who doesn't? It was hard to get residue out of the holes. It might have been his least favorite thing to do in life. Somebody called Ott on the phone. He picked up the receiver here. "Utni here," he bellowed. "Nobody's ever been alive as long as you," said a voice. It sounded like a ghost, reedy and echoic. It sounded like Hawgstrüffel. "Hawgstrüffel?" said Ott. There was a faraway moan, interrupted by the sonic dissonance of a passing super train, and the line went dead. Distraught, Ott abandoned the guacamole, no time. He went to the pool and took off his clothes and put on suntan lotion and ordered a margarita. The waiter skipped away excitedly and put the order in with the bartender. Ott reclined on a lounge chair and closed his eyes and thought about what it would feel like to die. The dissolution of consciousness, the prospect terrified him, and he got up and put his clothes back on and went back home and locked and bolted the front door and the back door and the attic door. This happened before the margarita had even been served, depressing the bartender, who had really put a lot of effort into the drink, how it tasted and how it looked. And when the waiter gave him the news, he nearly gave everything up. As if in retaliation for the act of impertinence, somebody killed Ott. It was van der Zweed. The murder had nothing to do with the margarita. Van der Zweed had received a similar phone call from a man or a ghost whose name may or may not have been Hawgstrüffel. He waited outside Ott's house, waited outside Ott's house until Ott came home and the sun went down, and then he poured a lot of gasoline onto the exterior of the house, and he also set up a number of explosives, and finally van der Zweed lit a match. Rationale: only one of us can live forever. More importantly, van der Zweed didn't like the pretense of Ott referring to himself as Utni. Deflecting one's signature is the stuff of anarchy, the quintessence of failure. Later, van der Zweed tried to call Hawgstrüffel and tell him what happened, but Rangier or Wendell Mowat or Nell or Thorstensen or Jürgen or Dietrich or Gelderloo or Bjorn or somebody else answered the phone, and all they did was make loud whooshing noises. So van der Zweed hung up and took a moment to collect himself. He was worried but confident. He was insecure but determined. He was fearful but adamant. He stood in the ash and blinked at the stars. The end.